Welcome to Her Drive Podcast, a female-focused interview series with women of the world discussing their road trips to success. I'm your host, Cynthia Cramblett, a travel expert, business owner, and curious spirit with a knack for meeting fascinating women. Please join me as I hop in the passenger seat and chat with these ambitious women about what drives them, twists and turns, and those pedal to the metal moments. Let's drive. Hello, everyone who's listening to Her Drive Podcast today. I'm super excited to be talking to Angie Mizell. She is an author, speaker, and conversation catalyst, which is perfect for today because we love talking to super interesting, high-achieving women who have made lifestyle shifts. And Angie is extremely perfect for this conversation. So welcome to Her Drive. Angie, how are you?
I'm great. And I'm so glad to be here. I do love talking about this topic of just making a shift and changing direction in your life when the moment calls for it.
And how does one know when when the moment has arrived?
Right. I feel like we have little clues along the way, but sometimes when we know it's perhaps too soon, or we're still not sure. So I always say to pay attention to that just inkling of awareness. The minute you get the sense that something isn't right or something feels off, just pay attention and don't freak yourself out because you don't have to do anything about that feeling. I think in my case, that's something I learned in hindsight, as we do with most things, that I was having a feeling that things were off, that maybe the goals I'd set for myself no longer were aligned with what I wanted. But I didn't trust that feeling because I have a super high work ethic and very committed to just succeeding, I suppose. And then it was scary, the idea of changing and then what? So I think I had an inkling of something needs to change for a while. And then it just starts to build. And you finally get to a moment that you know. And, that's what I want to encourage women to do is just trust their voice and then trust the path that their life is taking them on, because usually your life will show up to meet you and guide you and help you make the next step and the next step and the next step. So when it's finally time to leap, you actually have been taking a million steps. It's not as dramatic. It feels dramatic and it may look dramatic on the outside, but really it's just, you've been on this journey for a while. So
that is so beautiful. And what I love about hosting this podcast is that so many times my guests are speaking directly to me. So thank you. I have to show you, I don't know if it'll show up on the screen, my phone, but this message that came through to me this weekend. But I created a little background on my phone. But it says it's time to trust. And that was the feeling coming over me. It's like, okay, we need to make some shifts here. So I love that you called it an inkling of desire, and I follow because that's so in alignment with where I'm at. And I love that you share that. Thank you so much. So can we hear a bit more about your story and how you kind of had that Genesis moment and transform?
So I will start at where I am now and work backwards. In that I have a book coming out now. This is a dream of mine to have written. It's a memoir called Girl in the Spotlight. I have been working on this book. I mean, I thought I had a story in my mind, but then to just even try to write a book and teach myself how to write a book, more than a decade. This took longer than you would ever imagine. And I was doing all sorts of work related things too. But years ago, I was a television journalist. I had big dreams. I wanted to just keep moving up the ladder and go to Los Angeles, but somewhere in the course of my career was taking off. I started to change. I started to shift. I ended up leaving my job. So my memoir is about leaving my career in television news. I knew that leaving that career when I had so much time invested and so much of myself invested, and the ability to walk away from that when I did, it changed me somehow. I knew that it did. And for a while, I thought, well, I want to speak to women. I'll speak to groups about making leaps of faith and work-life balance and finding work that you love. And I do think that's a piece of my story, but something about those messages felt like they were falling flat. And I'm like, it feels close, but it doesn't feel like exactly it. So then I started writing the story. And it was actually in the process of telling my story, realizing that I was writing a memoir and not a self-help book, because memoir is so story driven, if that makes sense. And I started working the story backwards, and I realized that there was something deeper going on in that shift, because I was carrying things from my childhood and I had all these ideas about success that was keeping me stuck. When I needed to make a shift in my life, it's almost like I wouldn't let myself. So this book is really a process of unraveling my story and unpacking why it felt so hard to change to start with, if that makes sense. So this was a labor of love. I'm very proud of this story. And I really just hope that it encourages women to listen to themselves, take a leap, and maybe go back and look at their life and examine some things that have happened that we might be almost like weights and burdens and pain from the past that we might be carrying into our adult life, and it might be affecting our decision making. So yeah, the story is packed with that. It's more of a looking back and unraveling. And I'm approaching it as a television journalist. I always told other people's stories, but I had not yet and stopped and examined my own story. And that's what this memoir is. It's me looking back on my own story. And I will say that when I was writing the story and revising it, it was actually the pieces that I was skipping over, because I was like, people either don't want to hear my sad story or this is too hard to write about. I discovered that that actually was the story. So anyway.
Beautiful. With that, I mean, can you tell us a bit of the harder parts of your story?
Well, and again, I think by the time I was an adult, I was like, I've dealt with all this. When the therapist started asking me, so tell me about your childhood. But I'm a child of a broken home. My biological father was abusive. My stepfather adopted me. And then when my mom and stepfather got divorced, he was a little bit detached from my life. And then my grandparents passed away. But it was this whole situation that over a short period of time, I experienced a lot of loss, and everything that I came to know and feel about home sort of unraveled. And it was happening at a time where I started to look to what am I going to do with my life? And what I started noticing when I was writing the story is that as I was just experiencing loss after loss, I was turning to the spotlight to fill that void. And it wasn't that I wasn't well suited for my career, because I did pick a career that lined up with things I felt like I knew how to do. It was that the praise and the recognition and the accolades that come with being successful, I was getting that tangled up with my self-worth. And when it was time for me to shift, I couldn't let go of it because my identity was so attached to it. And that's what I realized in writing the story, that that's really what it's about, and in some ways now I'm a mother, and my children have never not known a mom who was writing a book, because I was writing this book alongside raising them. But I feel like I broke a cycle. When I stepped away from the career, it was bigger than changing jobs. It was walking away from a mindset. It was a commitment to doing my own work, healing my own wounds, redefining what success really means to me.
Mm.
And that is really what I hope now. It's so hard to work on something for so long, and then now it's out there. I have to release it and let other people receive it. And I do hope that the people who read it just feel more connected to their own story and feel a little bit braver,
Mm.
that they can handle the things that they are afraid of
Mhm.
when you make a leap.
Mhm. Definitely. That's so beautiful. And I think by you sharing your story, it gives people permission to lean into their own and to talk about their own deeper, darker things,
Exactly.
which we all, there's this beautiful common thread that connects us all. If we all just allow for vulnerability and truth and a little bit of compassion.
I really did think, again, it's not like I didn't know that my growing up years were difficult. And they weren't all bad, of course, but I viewed my life like I felt like I was a success story.
Mhm.
I mean, my family was proud of me, my friends and their parents. It was like, look what you've done with your life. Um, and I think that was the thing. I thought I had dealt with my past. And
Mhm.
sometimes, and I think you do, I think we deal with what we can deal with, but sometimes we're confronted with issues that we haven't fully resolved or come to terms with. And that's really, in hindsight, what was happening. I was starting to shift in my desire, but it was also like the things maybe I had been running from were starting to find me.
Mhm.
And it was creating problems in my very successful, beautiful life. And
Mhm.
I had to unpack it. I had no choice
Mhm.
because my life just sort of forced me to go stop running
Mhm.
and look. Yeah.
And in what ways did that force show up, if you don't mind sharing?
Well, it first it just started with a conflict of my husband and I were on a trajectory of we were going to move. He was in the same line of work. Um I suddenly felt like, wait, maybe I don't want to move. Maybe I want to stay in this city, buy a house. And he was like, wait, what are you doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So at first it just was like, can we maybe just slow down? um, and then just a detail of the story, he ended up getting a job across the country and I went with him. And then it manifested as like deep depression. Like I just fell into a huge funk as I um, was having an identity crisis. And then we moved back across the country. And when I was in my final job in television, I just was working so hard. It's like you're trying to make something work that is just not working anymore. And it was just kind of denying that you need to change, you need to do something different. And I kept trying to make this career work. And I was just getting mentally, emotionally, and physically sick. And and it wasn't to a level that anyone was super alarmed. They could tell maybe something wasn't right, but I was just kind of at that edge where I had lost myself.
Mhm.
And it actually was a conversation with a doctor who we were just having a normal doctor's appointment, but she asked me what was going on with me. And I told her that I really wanted to quit my career but I didn't know what to do. And she said something like, I have my career and I have my family and it's hard. And she said, I used to feel like you could have it all. And now I realize you have to make choices. And that could be interpreted like women can't have it all. Pick, do you want career? Do you want family? But the way she said it, it just reminded me that I had a choice, that I wasn't stuck in this circumstance, and that I could look at my life, kind of figure out what it is I really wanted, and I could choose.
Mhm.
And I understand that for many people, having a choice may feel like a privilege. And in some ways, it is a situation based on like some people feel like they're just stuck and they don't have a choice, but I feel like realizing you have a choice goes so deep, like into our soul,
Mm.
that even if you feel like you can't make a change right this moment, you can still be empowered within yourself of this is who I am, this is what I want for my life, and you can make a choice even in how you show up
Mm.
in your life that day. And I just realized, oh wait, I feel like a victim of my life and I do have a choice in this situation. And that really empowered me
Mhm.
to, and that really fast tracked me making some bold decisions of it's time.
Mhm. Mhm. And I think when we start to take accountability for our lives and like, hey, our life is mainly a compound of the decisions we have made, especially once we reach adulthood, there's a great deal of strength there. Or like, holy smokes, what did I do? Okay, I made these choices and placed myself in this position. Now I can alter my life by switching how I choose and what I step towards. And it sounds like you did that um
Yeah.
strongly.
Well, and earlier and again, in the book that you will see, there's a series of turning points. As I said, it's kind of like all these defining moments building. But earlier in the book, one of my bosses, a woman, a wonderful mentor, she told me, you're a smart woman. You trust your heart. It will tell you what to do. And that felt so profound. But the truth is, I started experimenting with trusting my heart, and I felt like everything fell apart. And then I was like, wait, I'm not going to trust my heart anymore. And I realized that having things work out exactly how we think they're going to work out, that actually isn't the point. The
Mm,
point is, are we making choices that feel true and realizing we can trust ourselves through this process?
mhm,
Because I do think for a while I was stuck in a loop that if you do everything right and you make all of the quote unquote right choices, whatever that means. But back then I thought I knew what that meant, that your life was going to unfold
yeah,
the way it should.
mhm.
And that's just not life. It's not
Sure.
always the way it is.
Absolutely. So do you have a practice that you embody to help you get clear on what's your head versus your heart?
Oh, that's such a great question. Okay, so I'm thinking aloud. I There's probably a number of ways. Sometimes if in the morning, if I'm just having coffee and quiet, there is a point where I start to hear, I call it my wise voice. And it sounds like me. It sounds like a thought, but I hear it differently and I can tell it's the wise voice. And I can tell by the way my body sort of responds to whatever it is I heard. So sometimes I just get quiet. I'll exercise. I feel like it's so important to get in our bodies. Um, and so I try not to, I do overthink. That is, but I can tell when I'm overthinking, and I've learned to just give something space. And when the thought or the idea or the feeling comes over me and there is either a relief around it or a peace around it, or it just feels different than all the other thoughts, that I have learned to recognize that as the truth.
Mm,
And if my emotions or my mind or my body is still very tense and panicky, or I feel stressed or rushed, I just know that I'm not there yet. Um, so sometimes I write, but I think it's mostly just creating stillness, however that works for you.
mm, mhm. Yeah. And hearing you say getting quiet, that really resonates with me, because we are so stimulated all the time.
That's right.
So how can you even differentiate between the ego self and the higher self if you can't even hear the voices clearly?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I love this question. And that is the $1 million question, isn't it? I think we have to recognize that we are sometimes battling with the ego self and the higher self. And what I will say about that is I think it takes practice. I
Mm,
just think you keep having the greatest thing that happened to me through this process is I developed a relationship with myself.
mm,
And something that a therapist said to me that took me a minute to get, and now I'm realizing how critical this was. She was telling me to feel my feelings.
mm,
And she made a joke that I have feelings about my feelings. So if something were upsetting to me, instead of just going, I'm so upset about this, I would start then judging myself or having a feeling about being upset. And what she helped me realize, and then it took practice, is that if you feel sad, if you feel that wave of emotion, it is just a feeling, it is energy. And if you really let yourself feel the feeling and you don't let it consume you, you will notice that it moves through you. So I have started to notice if I'm very high in my feelings that this needs to work through before I can think clearly about this. Now, that doesn't mean when I make a decision or I hear my higher self, I'm not still feeling emotions. I might still be sad or upset or angry about something, but there is an inner calm. And I
mm,
guess it does come from, I'm realizing this as I'm saying this to you, it's from feeling the feeling, not being afraid of the feeling, respecting it as energy, and it has to move. And a big catalyst for my story and finally getting to some freedom in my life was realizing that I had some unprocessed grief. I was sad about things that I did not realize I was sad about. And I think sometimes we don't fully let ourselves feel sad because that feels terrible. Um, but grief is a different sort of beast that it really wants you to acknowledge it, face it, feel it. It and then it miraculously sort of starts to work with you. And that is just, you have to release that grief and let yourself feel it. So if there's any sort of pain, I think that's been major for me too. It's just acknowledging, oh, I'm really sad about this.
mm,
And that has helped me get to a deeper level of knowing the difference between my ego, which is still intact. She's there, but the higher self is there too. And you can start to tell.
mhm, mhm.
Wow, this
Yeah.
is like another therapy session. It's
Yay.
like I'm realizing this as we're talking that that's what's happening.
Mhm. How beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
I lost my mind and I found my feelings.
Mm, yes.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of messages out there like don't trust your feelings and I don't know. I think you have to know what kind of person you are. Some people are really critical thinkers and I don't think thinking through an issue is necessarily a bad thing, or I don't always think it's wise to make an impulsive choice because you feel a certain way.
Mhm.
This is just a deeper feeling. Like you start to know, if you really think about your heart and your soul, that is deeper than the top layer feeling that might be
Mhm.
covering it up.
Yeah, like anger is a secondary emotion, right? So what are all the emotions felt before you felt anger? That was something I had to deal with. And once I realized that, I'm like, oh, I'm not really angry. I'm actually just deeply hurt by this. I'm so sad and I'm not being acknowledged in my sadness.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
huge.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we do sometimes equate grief or just being really sad about something to somebody has to die. I mean, that is a form of grief, but we grieve our losses.
Mm,
And when we lose things, whatever it is, we feel that loss and there's a grief process that we have to go through. And I wonder how many of us are walking around with sort of unnamed or unacknowledged grief, and how much is that really affecting the decisions we make
mm.
every day?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. You don't know until you start mining.
That's right. And that's not always fun. I wouldn't, um, but it's necessary. And I do feel like that was something that was happening inside of me, where it's interesting because this wiser thought we're talking about, I mean, in some ways I guess it's in my brain, it's coming from my mind, but I think it's coming up from my body, if that makes any sense. It's almost like it's working together. But I just remember having this thought, like, your life is falling apart, but I feel like you're unraveling for a reason. Like, this was what was going on in my brain. Like, you are being changed, and this change was necessary.
Mm.
Um, I didn't sign up for my plans to fall apart, but it was interesting to go, wait, maybe this is good.
Mhm.
That this is all falling apart.
Absolutely. And it's a wild mindset to come to. It's like, okay, I realize that my whole world is being deconstructed right now so that I can really build a bigger, better, stronger foundation to myself. But it's super uncomfortable, but you just have to have this faith that, and it seems like you did, that it's going to be even better than what I have right now, which feels super uncomfortable and not in resonance with my soul.
Yes. And
Mm.
there really was a faith that I noticed, and it was this deep, sudden knowing that I was going to be okay. Like, I was going to be taken care of. And it's almost just redefining for yourself what being okay means. Like,
Mm.
you can lose everything and still be okay. I mean, that's a weird concept to like get your mind around, but I do really feel like if there are forces out there that the good ones are rooting for me.
Mhm.
And that was interesting, that it's like it's not all dependent on me controlling my universe. I do think that's what it is. I realized I was trying so hard to control everything, and I didn't even realize it, where some of that faith is just releasing and knowing the difference of I can control my choice, but I can't control the outcome.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. Beautiful. And as we're nearing a close, I have a few more just questions for you. If you could go back in time and give a younger you some words of wisdom, what age would you go back to and what would you say?
I would go back to my 10-year-old self and tell her that she is not to blame and she has not done anything wrong.
Mm.
I would tell my slightly older self, the coming of age me, that you can trust yourself, and there's nothing wrong with performing or being in a spotlight or even choosing a high profile career if that's what you want. But you do not have to do that to be loved.
Mm.
You do not have to perform for others to be proud of you and love you. Who you are as you are is enough.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
with that, trust yourself,
Mm.
make the choices that feel good inside.
Mm. Mm. Mhm. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Was there any other sage words of wisdom or stories you'd like to share?
Yes, I feel like most things are not either or. I
Mm.
really do embrace it's both. There was so much in my story that was about letting go, walking away, releasing, and that leads to freedom. However, in other circumstances, holding on, not giving it up, not giving up, seeing something through, sticking with it, the relationship, the job, the struggle, even when it's hard, that can also heal you and free you.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you know which is which? I think that's where it just goes back to the central thing of tuning into yourself
Mm-hmm.
and trusting that the message that feels the truest to you is that's the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Life's a maze and a mystery, and that's the point.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, where can everyone find your book?
So it is online, your favorite bookseller, anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, just anywhere you like to buy books, it's there. You can also go to my website, angiemizell.com, and it's how you can find everything. I have a weekly newsletter, Hello Friday, that is, it's just stories and insights. Try to keep it short, minute, quick read. Find me on social media, angiemizell.com will lead you everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Magnificent. Well, Angie, I'm so grateful for your story and your boldness to step out and share it with the world via your book, and just how you show up on camera today. And I applaud you so very much. Thank you for being a guest, and I look forward to reading your book. I can't wait to order it.
Yeah, I know. I forgot to say the title again, but it's Girl in the Spotlight.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
With Cynthia Cramblett. If you want to know more about today's guest or know a fascinating woman you'd love for me to interview, please see the show notes, visit Instagram or her-drive.com. And please, 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 if you love the show, leave a review on iTunes. Thanks for riding along, and subscribe to join our next woman and her drive to success.